Snap. The dry, brittle sound of wood, splintering, tore through the quiet luxury of the multi-million-dollar penthouse. I froze. My hand, calloused and scarred, remained clenched tightly around the handle of my worn, faded cheese. That sound wasn't the natural expansion of wood, adjusting to the room's temperature. It was the agonizing groan of a structural system being pushed far past its physical limits. Are you deaf, old man? The sharp, grating voice of Kang shattered my concentration. The 28-year-old heir, clad in a designer suit that cost more than my entire year's wages, stood over me. His face was flushed red with impatience and arrogance. He gestured dismissively at the massive, unlaid planks of premium red, doussie wood scattered across the bare concrete floor. I told you, this place needs to be fully finished by tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning. Yet here you are, still slowly carving away at those stupid wooden joints like we're in the Stone Age. He kicked my old wooden toolbox. The heavy leather strap gave way, and my hand saws and steel rulers slid across the floor, clattering loudly against the hard concrete. The sound of my lifelong tools being tossed around like trash sent a sharp pang through my chest. He stood up slowly. A familiar, biting pain shot through my arthritic knees, making me catch my breath for a second. I didn't say a word. I just bent down and quietly picked up my brass-bound measuring tape. Don't you dare give me that silent, stubborn look, Kang sneered, stepping closer until I could smell his expensive cologne. My industrial crew could have nail-gunned this entire floor in 4 hours flat. But you stubborn, outdated relic. You've been crawling around here for 3 whole weeks. If my foreign buyers walk in tomorrow and see this place looking like a half-finished workshop, I will not only withhold every single cent of your pay, but I will personally sue you for delaying a multi-million-dollar handover. He looked directly into Hank's eyes. He had no idea. He didn't know that this entire penthouse was a ticking structural time bomb. He didn't know that if this premium hardwood was simply nail-gunned directly into the subfloor, the way his cheap, fast-paced crew wanted to do it, the entire surface would warp, buckle, and rip itself apart within 3 months. But I kept my mouth shut. He didn't want to hear the truth. He didn't care about craftsmanship. He only cared about speed, superficial gloss, and the massive wire transfer waiting for him upon completion. Did you hear a single word I just said? Han barked again, his face tightening. I heard you, I replied. My voice was raspy, dry from a long day of breathing in fine sawdust. I heard you clearly, but I will not use a nail gun. Kang blinked, momentarily stunned by my defiance. What did you just say? I said I will not use a nail gun on this floor, I repeated, keeping my voice level, even though my hands were shaking. This wood is alive. It needs interlocking mortise and tenon joints to breathe and shift with the changes in humidity. If you nail it down flat, you lock it in place. When the dry season hits, the tension will build until the floor literally explodes. Kang burst into a loud, mocking laugh. He shook his head and clapped his hands, together mockingly. Are you done with the lecture? You speak like you're some kind of legendary master artisan from a history book. He reached into his breast pocket, pulled out a folded document, and threw it at my feet. This is your termination. You're fired. Get your useless tools and get out of my penthouse before I have security throw you down the stairs. The papers fluttered through the air, landing flat on the dusty concrete. That paper represented Mai's final tuition payment. It was the only money I had left to make sure my daughter could finish her final semester at the architecture university. If I walked away now, her future would crumble. It wasn't just about the money, though. It was about the dignity of a craftsman who had spent 50 years refusing to do cheap, dishonest work. But Kang had already turned his back on me. He pulled out his phone, dialing his cheap, subcontracted crew. "Hey, get your guys up here now. I need this floor laid down by tomorrow morning. Use whatever speed nails you have. Just make it look pretty." I watched his shadow disappear into the elevator. My knees throbbed. The air felt heavy. Beneath the cold, thin layer of concrete under my feet, the cheap, hollow steel joists of the building's frame were subtly shifting. They were waiting for a single, heavy mistake. I began pack my hand saws and measuring tools into the worn wooden toolbox. Mishashi wood mallet, its dark surface, polished smooth by 30 years of sweat and hard labor, was placed carefully into the top compartment. My arthritic knee throbbed with a cold, biting ache once again. This joint pain had followed me through hundreds of job sites, from simple, thatched roof houses in the countryside to towering skyscrapers in the heart of the city. But never before had it felt quite as heavy as it did this afternoon. I sat down heavily on a rough wooden plank, squeezing my swollen knee with both hands to dull the pain. The distant honking of horns from the street below drifted up to the 45th floor, sounding far away and completely detached. The phone in my pants pocket began to vibrate. The screen lit up with the words, "My beloved daughter." I took a deep breath, swallowed the dry cough that was rising in my throat, and pressed the answer button. "Dad." Mai's voice rang out clear, bright, and warm, like a sudden ray of morning sun. "I have some amazing news to tell you." I forced myself to smile, even though I was surrounded by nothing but cold, gray concrete walls. "I'm listening, sweetheart. What's the happy news?" My architectural design blueprint, the green apartment concept. Dad, it was just approved by the creative director. They said my idea of combining natural materials with traditional wooden joints has real depth. I've been selected as one of the top 3 interns to present directly to the board of directors this weekend. My chest tightened. A wave of immense pride, mixed with a sharp, bittersweet itch, rose in my throat. My little Mai had truly grown up. She studied architecture, but everything she knew about wood, about creating structural joints without a single nail, came from the nights she spent watching me carve under our old porch. "I always knew you could do it, Mai," I said, my voice trembling slightly with emotion. "I'm so proud of you. Just stay confident and show them exactly what you've learned." "I will, Dad, but..." They just announced the final deadline for my internship fee and graduation project defense fee. The school says the final cutoff is the day after tomorrow. "Dad, did you receive the advance payment from the penthouse project yet? If things are too tight right now, I can ask them for an extension." I quickly cut her off, refusing to let her hear the mounting anxiety in my chest. "Don't you worry about that for a second. They've already approved my payment in full. The transfer will go through tomorrow. You just focus on preparing the absolute best presentation you can. I'll take care of everything else." "Thank you so much. Dad, make sure you eat well and don't overwork yourself. I have to go now." The call ended. The space around me suddenly returned to an eerie, terrifying silence. I looked down at my bare hands, covered in tiny wooden splinters and deep scrapes, my fingernails blackened from decades of accidental hammer strikes. I had just lied to my daughter. That tuition money, 30 million dong, was now nothing but a distant dream, since Kang had declared he would withhold my entire paycheck. Right at that moment, the screeching sound of the construction elevator started up again. The heavy metal doors slid open with a harsh, grating whine. Kang stepped out, accompanied by a heavy-set, middle-aged man wearing a high-visibility vest with the words "Technical Supervisor" embroidered on the front. Kang pointed directly at me, a cruel mocking sneer plastering his face. "See, there he is. That's the stubborn old fool I just fired." He barely laid down a few square meters of flooring and started making up stories about locking forces and interlocking joints. He even had the nerve to claim our structural steel joists underneath are too weak and about to collapse. The technical supervisor glanced at me with the classic, condescending look that an educated, certified professional gives to a manual laborer. He walked over, using the toe of his leather shoe to tap dismissively against the premium red doussie planks I had spent hours hand-planing to perfection. "Old man," the supervisor spoke, his voice dripping with superiority. "Do you have any idea who approved the structural blueprints for this building?" "The top engineers of our state-owned construction corporation. They use advanced computer simulations and load testing software to calculate every single kilogram of weight. And you're just a stubborn, uneducated carpenter. Did you even finish middle school before you decided to lecture us on load capacity?" He stood up slowly, clenching my fists tightly at my sides to keep my body from shaking under the combination of physical pain and sheer humiliation. "I don't have an engineering degree like you gentlemen do," I said, keeping my voice steady and measured. "But I have worked with wood for 30 years. I know that when a high-rise building experiences wind load at this altitude, it undergoes a very specific mechanical sway. The steel joist spacing you have underneath this floor is far too wide. When the concrete subfloor contracts and those steel joists begin to vibrate, if you nail gun this hardwood down flat, those nails will eventually be pulled clean out of their sockets. The entire surface of this floor will split open like a spider web." Kang stepped forward, reached down, and violently snatched the shashi wood mallet from my hands, hurling it into the far corner of the room. The heavy wood made a dull, painful thud as it struck the bare concrete wall. "Shut your mouth," Kang roared, his face contorting with rage. "You're nothing but an insect living off daily wages. Don't you dare stand there and lecture me. The structural phase has been signed off. The money is in our pockets, and the job is done. My new crew is on their way up. They're going to use high-pressure pneumatic nail guns to lock this entire floor down. In less than 24 hours, this penthouse will look absolutely flawless for the international inspection team. But as for you, grab your pile of garbage and get out of my sight immediately." He kicked my wooden toolbox toward the edge of the open, windy balcony. The wind from the 45th floor whistled through the unfinished window frames, freezing and merciless. I looked at the wood mallet lying in the dusty corner, then back at Kang and the supervisor. They weren't just insulting my work. They were actively endangering the lives of whoever would live in this penthouse. And they were trampling on the dignity of a father who was willing to do whatever it took to keep his daughter's future alive. I walked quietly to the corner, bent down and picked up my shashi wood mallet. I wiped the white plaster dust from its surface, placed it carefully into my toolbox, and closed the lid. "Fine," I said, my voice shockingly calm. "I'll leave. But you mark my words today. When the northeast winds hit this building the night after tomorrow, and when that balcony pool is filled to the brim with water, your nail-gunned floor will be the very first thing to explode." Hang burst into a loud, mocking laugh, jeering in triumph as he watched me carry my heavy toolbox into the elevator. The elevator doors slid shut, cutting off the arrogant face of the young heir. I stood in the cramped space of the elevator, completely alone with the darkness and my own helplessness. But deep within me, a silent decision had already been forged. I would not break. For my daughter, and for the wood that never knew how to lie. I carried my heavy wooden toolbox out of the lobby of the 45-story building. The cold wind blowing from the river hit my face, carrying the scent of salt and dust from the nearby construction sites. The pain in my knee was still throbbing, but my mind was completely focused on Mai. I had to find a way to get 30 million dong before the day after tomorrow to pay for her final tuition fees. That was a father's promise, and I had never broken a promise to my daughter. I walked over to a small roadside tea stall opposite the construction site and placed my toolbox on the ground. From this spot, I could see the construction elevator constantly moving up and down the 45th floor. Trucks loaded with cheap industrial flooring, heavy bags of cement, and chemical glues were pouring into the underground garage. Right then, Twen, my 20-year-old apprentice whom I took under my wing last year, ran toward me, panting heavily. Sweat was dripping down his forehead, mixed with gray sawdust. "Master, I heard that arrogant young heir fired you," Tuan gasped, grabbing my shoulders. "And they didn't pay us a single cent. 30 million dong of our sweat and tears over the last 3 weeks. Just gone." He placed my scarlet, callosed hand on Tuan's shoulder, motioning for him to sit down on a plastic stool. "Calm down, son," I said, gently. "Yes, they terminated our subcontract. But don't worry. I will find a way to take care of my tuition. What's important right now is that you listen very carefully to what I am about to tell you." Tuan looked at me with red, tearful eyes full of anger, yet his respect for me remained absolute. "Master, tell me what to do. I will do exactly as you say." I reached down, opened a small drawer at the bottom of my toolbox, and pulled out an old brass mechanical thermometer with a long probe wire. This was the tool I used to measure the temperature and moisture level of hardwood before planing it. I placed the thermometer into Tuan's hands. "Tomorrow, when the new crew begins gluing and nail-gunning the floor, find a way to get back onto the site under the pretext of cleaning up construction debris. I need you to drop the probe wire of this thermometer down into the gap of the structural steel joists beneath the subfloor at the eastern corner, right next to where the balcony pool is located. If the temperature down there exceeds 38 degrees Celsius, and you hear a faint, high-pitched whistling sound coming from the underfloor heating pipes, you must call me immediately." Tuan furrowed his brows, completely confused. "Master, why the balcony corner? And why would the temperature rise there? I looked up at the 45th floor, where the massive glass panes of the penthouse reflected the blood-red sunset. Because that young heir built a mini swimming pool weighing over 5 tons right on the edge of the main cantilevered balcony. They cut corners by removing the structural steel supports underneath to save space and money. When that pool is filled with water, the massive static load will press down on the steel joists that are already expanding and contracting due to the heat. The high heat from their underfloor heating system will melt their cheap industrial glue, destroying all surface adhesion. When that happens, their nail guns won't be able to hold the wood down anymore. The massive kinetic force from the shifting steel structure will pop those steel nails right out of the floor like shrapnel. The entire floor will buckle and collapse from that exact weak point. Tuan shuddered as he finally understood the sheer scale of the danger. Then, why don't we just report this to the building management? He let out a bitter laugh, gesturing toward my old wooden toolbox. What value does a warning from an uneducated, aging carpenter have to people who only believe in computer-generated simulations? They need to see the truth with their own eyes. And I will stay right here to make sure no innocent lives are lost because of their arrogance. That night, I didn't go home. I rented a cheap, tiny room near the construction site. I carefully disassembled my chassis wood mallet to inspect the locking wedge at the head. My right hand had started to shake slightly, a lingering symptom of a bad scaffold fall 10 years ago. I had to use my left hand to grip my wrist, forcing my muscles to stay steady and ready for what was to come. Outside, the wind began to howl. The weather broadcast warned of a historic cold front accompanied by heavy storms that would slam into the city tomorrow night. Right at the exact time, the penthouse was scheduled for its grand opening and handover to the foreign VIP buyers. I stared out the window, quietly praying for my daughter as she worked late into the night on her presentation. The moment of truth was coming, very soon. The northeast monsoon slammed into the city on the exact night of the penthouse handover. The wind howled through the gaps in the high-rise structure like a roaring beast. It was exactly 8:00 p.m. The 45th floor penthouse was bathed in brilliant, luxurious neon light. Kang stood in the center of the grand lobby, wearing his finest suit to welcome the group chairman and the international inspection team. Their leather shoes clacked sharply against the freshly finished doussie wood floor, which looked completely flat and glossy. Excellent work, the chairman nodded, looking around the multi-million-dollar apartment. Fast progress, flawless appearance. Kang puffed out his chest with pride, a triumphant smile plastered across his face. Thank you, Chairman, Kang said confidently. We had to eliminate those slow, stubborn, outdated contractors and use the most modern pneumatic nail gun technology instead. But right at that moment, from the balcony corner, near the pool, a faint crack echoed through the room. Kang flinched, but he quickly ignored it and continued leading the delegation outside. The mini swimming pool, filled with over 5 tons of water, was rippling under the heavy winds. Suddenly, the old mechanical thermometer that Twenten had secretly dropped into the steel joist gap began to vibrate violently. The temperature beneath the concrete subfloor was skyrocketing to 42 degrees Celsius because the high-powered underfloor heating had been cranked to maximum to quickly dry the chemical glue. The cheap industrial glue began to liquefy under the intense heat. It completely lost its adhesion. At the same time, the weight of the pool created a static deflection, causing the structurally weak steel joists below to bend and vibrate in resonance with the wind. Clack! Clack! A succession of rapid pops sounded like small gunshots right beneath their feet. A doussie plank near the pool edge suddenly exploded upward, shooting a 2-inch steel nail high into the air. Ah! One of the inspectors screamed as the nail grazed past his face. To everyone's absolute horror, the once flawless wooden floor began to buckle and warp like angry waves. Plank after plank ripped free from their nails, bending and splintering in a rapid chain reaction stretching from the balcony straight into the main lobby. The massive glass frames warped under the shifting weight, cracking into terrifying spiderweb patterns. What is the meaning of this, Kang? The chairman roared, stumbling as the floor shifted beneath his feet. Kang's face turned paper white. He frantically screamed at his maintenance crew to shut off the heating system, but the automatic controls were jammed as the buckling wood had severed the signal cables. The only exit door of the penthouse jammed shut, locked tight, because the shifting ceiling had warped the door frame. They were trapped inside a shaking, collapsing multi-million-dollar cage. Right then, Tuan ran out from behind the service elevator, holding his phone connected to a two-way radio. "We warned you," Tuan shouted over the howling wind. "Only my master can save this floor now." The chairman grabbed Tuan by his shoulders. "Who is your master? Call him here right now, at any cost." The service elevator doors slowly slid open. I stepped out, my old wooden toolbox slung over my shoulder, holding my chisel and my familiar shashiwood mallet. He looked directly into Hank's eyes. The young heir was now trembling, cowering in the only safe corner of the room, the exact spot I had reinforced with interlocking double dovetail joints weeks ago. The truth had finally revealed itself. Not through my words, but through the quiet fury of the wood they had so deeply despised. I placed my worn wooden toolbox down onto the structural floor, shifting beneath my feet. The heavy scent of friction-burned doussie wood filled the air, acrid and suffocating. Kang saw me step out from the service elevator, his eyes widening in absolute terror, as if he had just seen a ghost. Why are you here?" Kang stammered, his knees shaking so violently he could barely keep his balance. I didn't even look at him, keeping my eyes fixed on the fractures, spreading like spider webs from the balcony edge to the main lobby. "Save me, save us." The group chairman, Kang's father, rushed forward and grabbed my shoulders, his voice raspy with raw panic. "The structural steel's subfloor has already deflected by 2 centimeters. Our only emergency exit is jammed shut." "Is this entire building? Is it about to collapse?" I gently removed the chairman's trembling hands from my shoulders and shook my head calmly. "The structural shell of this tower is perfectly safe," I said, my voice steady and quiet amidst the roaring storm. "But your son's nail-gunned floor is actively destroying itself. The weight of that 5-ton pool on the balcony is creating a heavy static deflection, bending the thin steel joists underneath. As the joists bend, they force the premium doussie wood to stretch beyond its physical limit. But your son used pneumatic guns to lock these planks tight into the concrete subfloor. The wood has no room to expand or shift with the building's natural movement. Therefore, the mechanical tension has been building up like a tightly compressed steel spring. And right now, that spring is bursting. Every single nail that gets popped out of its socket will trigger a violent chain reaction across this entire 500 square meter floor. Hearing those words, Han collapsed onto the buckling floorboards. He stared at the steel nail that had grazed his face earlier, now embedded deep into the drywall behind him. What do I do now? Kang sobbed, his usual arrogance completely gone, replaced by the sheer cowardice of an incompetent man. Mr. Vinh, I am so sorry. I'll pay you double, triple your rate. Please, just save this project. Please. I looked down at the young heir kneeling on the floor, then turned to look at Tuan and Mai standing safely near the elevator doors. I didn't come back here for your money, Mr. Han, I said coldly. I came back because I refused to watch the hard work of hundreds of honest craftsmen be destroyed by your sheer arrogance and neglect. I turned to Tuan, nodding to my young apprentice to prepare the tools. Tuan, bring me the heavy mortising chisel and the she wood mallet. Yes, master. Tuan quickly opened the wooden toolbox, presenting both tools with two hands in absolute reverence. He took the shashi mallet, its dark, polished grain reflecting the flickering neon lights above. I walked directly to the borderline, where my interlocking double dovetail floor met the nail gun section laid by the industrial crew. At that exact line, my section of the floor remained completely silent, flat and solid as a mountain. It had absorbed the entire kinetic force of the shifting steel joists by allowing the joints to breathe. He knelt down, placing the razor-sharp edge of the steel chisel against the critical locking key of the joint. Everyone, step back away from the balcony, I shouted. I raised the heavy shashi mallet high with my left arm, putting every ounce of my remaining strength into the decisive strike. Tooth. A deep, warm, resonant sound echoed as wood met steel. The locking dovetail joint sheared clean through, instantly releasing the massive kinetic tension trapped beneath the nailed floorboards. Crash, crash. The entire section of the cheap, nailed balcony floor collapsed violently down onto the bare concrete slab below, leaving a clean gap that completely neutralized the shifting tension. The massive glass frame warped back into its true vertical alignment, and the terrifying cracking sounds stopped instantly. The jammed exit door of the penthouse popped open as the structural pressure was released. The storm wind rushed into the lobby, blowing away the remaining sawdust and revealing a stark contrast. One half of the apartment was a ruined, shattered pile of splintered wood and twisted nails. But the other half, the section Tuan and I had spent 3 weeks carefully hand-carving with interlocking joints, stood perfectly straight, without a single scratch. The group chairman stared at the flawless floor beneath my feet, then looked down at his son trembling on the ruined ground. He walked over to me and bowed his head low in front of the entire international inspection team. I am deeply sorry, Master Carpenter, the chairman said, his voice trembling with emotion and shame. My son's arrogance almost cost us our lives and destroyed the reputation of this entire corporation. Your manual craft and your professional integrity are the strongest structures in this entire building. Khan closed his eyes tightly, gripping the broken wood shards on the floor, not daring to look up at anyone. The collective sigh of relief from those inside the room finally broke the tension. It was quickly drowned out by the storm wind, still howling outside the thick glass. I quietly packed my steel chisels and my shashi wood mallet back into the toolbox. My knee gave another sharp, throbbing reminder of my injury. But deep inside my chest, a strange, quiet peace was spreading. The chairman walked over to me, pulling out a pre-signed check from his pocket. "This is 50 million dong," he said, presenting it with both hands in absolute respect. "This is the proper wage for your 3 weeks of hard work. And it is also my personal, deepest gratitude for saving our lives tonight." I looked at the check, then looked over at my daughter, Mai. She was standing there, her eyes glistening with tears, but her face was beaming with pure pride for her father. I did not take the check from the chairman's hands. I gently pushed his hands back. "I will only accept 30 million dong, the exact amount we agreed upon before," I said quietly. "I am a simple carpenter. I live by the sweat of my brow and the strength of my craft, not by charity or pity." The chairman froze. Then he nodded, his eyes filled with profound admiration. He immediately tore up the old check and wrote a new one for 30 million dong. "You understand," he said, his voice dropping to a low register. "Your integrity is worth far more than any multi-million-dollar penthouse in this city." He accepted the check, carefully folded it, and slipped it into the chest pocket of my work vest, right next to my heart. Mai's final tuition fees were officially taken care of. My daughter's future was secure. That was all a father like me ever needed. I turned my gaze toward Kang, who was still sitting in a daze on the pile of ruined, splintered wood. The arrogant, rich kid swagger was completely gone. "Mr. Han," I called out softly. He flinched and looked up at me, his eyes clouded with deep shame and embarrassment. "Doussie wood is a very precious gift," I said, my voice gentle yet rock solid. "It took hundreds of years in the deep forest to grow into what it is. It carries the life and the spirit of the earth within its grain. When you use steel nails to violently lock it down, you aren't just ruining a material. You are suffocating its nature. Whatever profession you choose in life, if you do not learn to respect your materials and respect the silent hands that build them, then whatever you build, no matter how grand, will eventually crumble right beneath your feet." Kang lowered his head to the ground, his shoulders shaking. He couldn't find any words, only letting his tears of regret fall onto the rough, dry wood planks. I slung my heavy toolbox over my shoulder, gave a polite nod to the chairman, and walked toward the elevator. Mai stepped up beside me, wrapping her arms tightly around my calloused, scarred arm. "Dad, you are absolutely amazing," she whispered, resting her head against my shoulder. I smiled, feeling the warmth of my daughter radiating through my thin work clothes. Outside, the storm was finally beginning to clear. The very first rays of the new day were breaking through the dark clouds, painting the river below in a warm golden light. The life of an old carpenter like me would go on with the same wood, the same familiar smell of sawdust. But I knew, from this day forward, my daughter would step into the world with the strongest foundation possible. A foundation built on the unbreakable wooden joints of professional dignity and self-respect. How about you? Have you ever witnessed real, quiet value being trampled on just for some cheap, superficial gloss? And would you choose to stay silent, or would you use your craft and integrity to prove what truly matters? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for listening to my family story.